You're listening to Breaking Biz Dev with John Tyerman and Mark Wainwright. Conversations that break down, beat up, and redefine business development for the professional services firms of tomorrow. And now for your hosts, John and Mark.
Welcome back to Breaking Biz Dev. If this is your first time here, thanks for joining us on this podcast where we'd like to beat up and break down topics related to business development. My name is John Tyerman. I'm joined, as always, by my trusted co-host, Mark Wainwright. And today we're going to break down 6 sales competencies for professionals because, well, let's face it, being a technical expert really isn't enough to lead or to grow a firm. At some point, experts need to contribute to this nebulous topic we know as business development. And Mark, you've written an article titled 6 Sales Competencies for Professionals. We'll link that in the show notes here. And I think this is a great framework for individuals who want to increase their sales skills.
Yes, these 6 sales competencies, and I know all our friends in business development, just when we say that word sales, John, their the skin, just that their hair just stands up on the back of their neck. This is important stuff. In order to really find sales competencies, how the world views competent salespeople, the types of behaviors that they exhibit when they are learning and becoming better and better salespeople is actually much, much longer than this. Most professionals have an exhaustive list of competencies related to their profession. I've taken a number of those competencies and kind of boiled them down a little bit to 6 different areas. And within those areas, there are more detailed competencies. But this is stuff that's really important for our business development professionals. And when I walk through these competencies, I am picturing firm owners, firm leaders, the doer sellers, the people who are balancing the service delivery with finding and winning new work. I have those people in mind. These competencies are critical for success in professional services. Some individuals who undertake sales in those firms will be more proficient in certain areas and maybe less others. The hope is that a successful professional services firm can have broad capabilities and excellence across all of these areas, likely across multiple individuals, so that you can be running a good, efficient sales organization, a good sales function. So these 6 are just a few among many, but these are important ones. And yes, I wrote about this a while ago, and we will link to that article so people can review that. So I'm well. How are you today, John?
That's great. Well, I'm doing pretty good myself.
Good.
And so, Mark, you said that when we mentioned sales, the hairs on the back of maybe some of our listeners' necks are starting to stand up. And I think let's take a relaxed approach. Let's liken sales to something that's we can all enjoy. Fishing. In your article, you say sales is like fishing. Can you describe that? Like, why is sales like fishing?
Well, it's the image that I have in the article is a fishing image, and I thought that image or that concept actually plays 2 roles. Mm-hmm. One is the obvious connection, the obvious analogy of fishing for opportunities in your profession. Sure, that's fairly obvious. And in the work that I do, I teach people to fish, right, as a part-time sales manager for part-time salespeople like architects, engineers, and others. That is the role I play. I am not the rainmaker. I am not the hired sales or business development individual. And I really believe that's important. I think that technical professionals in all different types of professional services firms need to learn how to, air quotes, fish, right?
Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man a fish, you feed him for a lifetime.
Sure, that one, right? Exactly. So there we go. That's the one. The other part of that image, the thing that really caught me, was this image of an older person, likely a grandfather, sitting next to possibly a grandson, at the edge of the water fishing together. That's a wonderful image to kind of picture in your mind. And what we're going to talk about today ties into that. Not specifically the competencies, but how people develop mastery over time. So that's the other part of this, of that image, that analogy that really struck me. And yeah, sure. Let's talk a little bit about fishing.
Forgive me for jumping the gun on
Yeah.
that adage there. Mark, you developed this tool or a framework, let's say, that can help individuals elevate their sales competence. You call it the sales competence matrix. And there's really two dimensions to this matrix. Think about this: on the vertical axis, you have these sales competencies, which we're going to get into. And on the horizontal axis, you have these 5 different levels of mastery. Let's start there. So the 5 levels are knowing, understanding, practicing, improving, and teaching others. Can you unpack those 5 different levels of mastery?
Quite honestly, John, I had first come across this when my young children were moving through school, and there were some assessments that weren't necessarily tied to grades. There were assessments that were, at grade level, below grade level, and then there was a kind of a high level of mastery or proficiency that was associated with being able to teach others, whether it was mathematics or writing or whatever it was. So this was introduced to me a long time ago. My children are older now. So I wanted to find the roots of that. So I went searching, and it could have come from a number of different places. But one source that I found that I thought was very interesting was these 5 levels, the 5 you just mentioned, have roots in the Toyota way, right? And the Toyota way was developed by the organization Toyota, the company Toyota, over in Japan. And Toyota is famous for process improvement, lean manufacturing, all of
Six
these.
Sigma, right?
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, Six Sigma is associated more with Westinghouse, but
Okay.
Six Sigma does have its roots in the Toyota in the Toyota system. But I dug and I found some information in a book that was all about the Toyota way, and it went through these 5 levels of mastery. And it struck me that these were really, really useful and really a great way to look at mastery. Like you said, the first level of mastery is to know or have heard the concepts. So that's knowing. The second is to know and really understand the concepts. That's understanding. The third is to be able to do on your own very well. And I refer to that as practicing.
Mm-hmm.
The fourth is to do continuously very well over time and then show improvement. That's improving. And then the fifth is to be able to do and then to teach others how to do it well. The furthest expression of mastery, I believe, is that whole teaching others thing. So right, that's our horizontal axis across this competency matrix. And I think it's really, really appropriate. And I have reframed the work that I do with individuals when I am working through a process of taking technical professionals who have maybe some exposure to developing new business and sales, and how I can start to reframe or bucket the work I do with them, and we move through those different 5 levels of mastery.
Okay. I see how teaching others, that is the highest form of mastery, because you understand it, you've practiced it, you can lean on experience in your ability to teach it to others, and that shows that you can convey maybe some of the intricacies of some of these competencies in a simple way. So let's get into these 6 sales competencies for professionals. I'm going to list them off, and then Mark, let's go kind of dig a little bit deeper into each one. Does that sound good?
Great.
Let's do it. Okay, so the 6 sales competencies are: number 1, behaviors and mindset; number 2, the sales process; number 3, sales planning; number 4, practice, industry, and client knowledge; number 5, prospecting; and then number 6, pricing and value. So let's start with behaviors and mindset. Mark, can you just kind of give our listeners a little bit of a layer deeper into that one?
Sure. These areas are among many, but in order to kind of reduce complexity, simplify these areas of focus for what I feel are really important competencies related to sales for professionals, these are a handful. And the first one is that behaviors and attitude. And again, with all these competencies, and as we look at them, as we're building this matrix, right, we've got a vertical axis, we've got a horizontal axis. As we're building this, all of these competencies need to be something that can be observed, measured, and assessed, right? So this first one's a tricky one to start off with because sometimes this is a little bit more nebulous or a little bit maybe more intangible than some of the others, but nevertheless still very important. So the first one, like you said, behaviors and attitude. A few of the sort of sub competencies or components of that larger category are: an individual, brings energy to sales conversations, right? They are intrinsically motivated. That motivation and that energy is observable. It is something that they share with their teammates internally and with their prospective clients that they're working with. These are people who are eager to learn, eager to build sales skills and competencies, in this list. They are coachable and they value coaching. They have a very good sense of curiosity with their prospects, that they're starting to gain and understand the need to be responsible and accountable for eventual new business development, for revenue generation. And they have great sort of general instincts, right? They know when to bring in team members when necessary. They know when to bring in subject matter experts when necessary. They have very good follow through, very good timely follow up. Those types of behaviors where you see a real good sense of energy, momentum, enthusiasm, etc. And we won't do this for all of these buckets, but just for this, you can see how they start to hopefully map across these 5 areas.
Right.
One is sort of the knowing part. And when I refer to knowing, and I'm talking about competencies, knowing is about being introduced to ideas. So knowing, typically in my role,
It's like awareness of the idea.
right, I would be introducing concepts and ideas to people where, whether whether I'm relating to them one-on-one or in a group session where I'm presenting information. Okay, got it. They start to see the nomenclature, the concepts and the ideas. So there you go. When they start to understand them is when they're starting to practice them, because inevitably we start to understand things more as we start to practice it. Oh, I see how that works now. Great. So then they transition to practicing, where they're using this skill, week in, week out, whatever it is. And then they see opportunities, both, sort of looking in the mirror, seeing opportunities for improvement, or they start to get more and more feedback and input from mentors, coaches, etc., about how to improve. Maybe they start changing some approaches in their sales activities, that sort of thing. And then ultimately, with time, and I really think this whole process takes time, then when they reach this teaching others stage, they've practiced, they've improved, and they have enough experience and perspective to be able to start sharing their experiences, start guiding others, start making recommendations and providing feedback and sort of constructive criticism to others in, who are still sort of walking through these steps. So, and, quite honestly, John, we have 5 steps here. I don't think people ever truly arrive at sort of this ultimate level of mastery. Right. If you are a true lifetime learner, I think the more and more that you uncover, the more you discover, the more you realize an opportunity to learn and improve, et cetera. But I do think at some point people reach a level where they're comfortable and confident enough to be able to teach others.
I
So
agree.
that's behaviors and attitude, and we checked a few of those sort of subtasks underneath that.
Sure. Before we move on to a sales process, I just have a couple questions about this. So you mentioned, I think there was like 8 or 9 different kind of like sub buckets underneath of that behaviors and attitude competency. When you're working with your clients, do you recommend they rate each one of those sub buckets on a certain scale? Like what's the scale in which you use? Is it like 1 to 5, 1 to 10?
Yeah, the 5 levels of improvement, the knowing, understanding, practicing, improving, and teaching others, are basically our 1 to 5.
Okay, got
So
it.
if we have observable behaviors relative to someone who is bringing energy to sales conversations with prospects, if they have been introduced to a particular concept, check, great. Number 1, knowing is done, right? The number 2 understanding level relative to that thing I just pointed out brings energy to sales conversations with prospects. If there's an observable behavior there, if you saw that, oh, they get it, they understand the importance, they start making the connection between I need to bring energy to sales conversations and interactions with prospects because it's infectious, because it creates a good momentum for both of us, because sales is hard and buying is hard. So if I'm the individual in these conversations that's bringing good sense of energy, focus, momentum, then that leads us to that next step, right? So these are
Yeah.
observable behaviors that we can just start checking off. Great, knowing, got it, understanding, got it. Now we're practicing. So yeah, so this is steps on a staircase where they're walking their way up.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, and I can see how you can have snapshots in time every quarter or so where you look at maybe there's an average score for behaviors and attitude, an average score for some of these other competencies, and use that as a coaching tool kind of there. So let's move on to a sales process. So can you break that one down for us?
I often refer to the sales process as a series of conversations, as the sales conversations. So some of the elements that fall within this bucket is individuals understand and embrace the fact that selling needs to be a process. It needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's a logic and a rationale to the various steps. When we break it down, individuals are able to lead successful qualification conversations where they're able to qualify or disqualify prospective clients early on, making really, really effective use of the organization's time. They're able to say no. They're able to refer a prospective client to someone else who might be able to help them better, or they're able to confidently qualify a prospective client and just establish next steps. Great, this looks like a fantastic fit. Let's move to step 2, right? Following that initial qualification conversation, they're able to develop and then reflect back to the client a really clear understanding of their situation, their needs, the desired outcomes that they would like to see from any work that they would do together. If it's an engineering firm, they're able to really clearly articulate what the client is really attempting to achieve here. So they are able to walk through all of these steps. They're able to have a really successful and thorough discovery conversation. They're able to manage sort of the proposal and then the negotiations steps and do that well. So this is definitely kind of an umbrella category, and we break it down in further competencies because other categories sort of warrant more details. But sales process in general is, there are steps. I'm able to sort of navigate all those steps and do that successfully. And then, obviously this whole teaching others thing, I'm able to walk alongside the up and comers and teach them what this sales process is all about. You're listening to Breaking Biz Dev,
The podcast that beats up, breaks down, and redefines business development for the professional services firms of tomorrow. Your hosts are John Tyerman, founder of Red Cedar Marketing, the podcast marketing company for experts and professional services firms,
and Mark Wainwright, principal consultant and founder of Wainwright Insight, the fractional sales manager and sales consultant to professional services firms.
If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by following the show and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts.
And now, back to the show.
Yeah, I think the key point that you made is making efficient use of firm time, because that's the whole goal of a process, is so that you can make efficient use of that time and standardize that process across all of the different prospects or opportunities that you're managing in a pipeline.
Right.
So I guess let's move on to the next one, sales planning. How is that different from a sales process?
Sales planning is all about being, frankly, a step or two out in front of your prospective clients. Most folks don't associate planning with sort of the whole world of sales. Most folks think that a really competent, good salesperson is just going to show up at the meeting and shoot from the hip, right? I have found the opposite to be true, particularly with technical professionals who need to have more comfort and confidence in these conversations. They can get a little uncomfortable there. So the more planning they can do, the better off they are. So again, when we talk about sales planning, one of the competencies is kind of understanding the need and the importance of being more planful and more deliberate and more intentional about selling in your sales activities. One of the things that I coach my clients on are how to develop call plans. And call plans, it's a funny term, but call plans are a universal term. That are very simple plans created for important interactions. And specifically in sales, a sales call plan is a plan around, sort of setting up and then executing a really, really successful sales call, whether it's an early qualification call or whether it's a proposal conversation. So just creating this little micro plan around that whole interaction. And it can be a face-to-face interaction. It could be a Zoom call. It could be a telephone call, whatever it is, whatever type of interaction, just being able to create and then execute on that plan. And you can see how that moves through those 5 steps, why that is so important. Mm-hmm. Other parts of sales planning are opportunity plans. When an organization is going to pursue a particular opportunity, that they're able to structure a client-centric plan around winning that opportunity. There's account development plans. Account development plans are the way that organizations can develop trust and revenue with their most important client accounts. So that's a focused effort on your most important clients. Then there's segment development plans that help you grow in a very focused way in specific industries, markets, et cetera. So all those are elements of sales planning, all the way from the micro, call plans, these little interactions, all the way up to the big sort of, how do we grow in a particular market or industry, and how do we do that in a planned way? So that's kind of sales planning.
Excellent. And I can see how the marketing function within firms can really help with those segment plans and even the account plans as well.
Oh, totally. You're absolutely right.
We've created a lot of content recently on this podcast around our next sales competency, which is prospecting. Let's dive into some of the different elements of prospecting as a sales competency.
Yeah, so prospecting is individual proactive outreach in a one-to-one fashion to very, very targeted prospective clients.
You're creating your own business.
Creating
right?
your own business rather than just kind of waiting for it to come to you. Some individuals just intuitively or inherently have this ability or this desire. I believe just about everybody out there can learn to do it in a very structured way. Referrals are part of prospecting. Approaching in a proactive way individuals that contacts that well, and asking them for connections and introductions to people that they know who you could help. Prospecting is being, part of one of the competencies related to prospecting is being able to develop and define a target list. Mm-hmm. And then being able to pursue those specific prospects, those specific targets in a focused way with various channels, social media, email, face-to-face meetings, whatever it is. So being able to maintain a list and constantly be, kind of building that muscle, using that prospecting muscle again and again. People who I believe are really, really successful with prospecting just have this built into their week in, week out behaviors. they're constantly looking for new opportunities with existing, you know, connections through referrals, or they're constantly doing research for new prospective clients, because we mentioned it just earlier, John. They understand the power of creating new opportunities rather than having them just sort of show up in their inbox as a request for proposals or something else. So yeah, prospecting is really, really important.
You can see how these competencies complement each other too. Without, you need a structured process in order to do prospecting efficiently and effectively. You need a good plan in order to know what prospects to go after and how to develop your lists. And so I think this kind of leads to our next sales competency, which is industry practice and client knowledge, and how to develop a strong competency around that knowledge. So let's unpack this. What do we mean by each of these different ones? So industry knowledge, practice knowledge, and client knowledge.
Yeah, I'll often bucket them because a lot of this has to do with internal research, organizational awareness, organizational knowledge, industry knowledge, that sort of thing. And for a lot of technical professionals, this is the easiest one to check off, right?
Yep.
Industry knowledge is kind of understanding the bigger picture in the industry, trends, emerging areas of expertise, competition, different processes, structures, just the way the industry works, et cetera. Maybe a little bit of the lingo, but maybe less so that, just a really firm understanding of the industry. The second one is a really deep understanding of your practice, your service offerings, how you work with clients, how you are hopefully different and better than your competition through a unique offer or some focused areas of expertise you developed over time. And then there's a little bit relative to inside the practice knowledge. There's some financial stuff that's there, understanding just the whole idea of, revenue and profitability and service delivery and overhead costs and all of that, because eventually that all becomes an important component of, how you price, how you're positioned in the marketplace, that sort of stuff. The last one is client knowledge, and client knowledge, these observable behaviors in client knowledge, related to these proficiencies. You're doing the research and being able to understand your specific client, understanding maybe what they're going through at a macro level, like big picture, or maybe even understanding from a micro level through some conversations or discovery about what their specific challenges and needs are, and what opportunities exist for you to work together. And client knowledge is also associated with prospecting. You want to be able to identify, articulate, and be really clear about who your ideal clients are.
That's right.
Having really deep knowledge of what that is, and then leveraging that in that other competency we talked about, which is prospecting. So client knowledge is not just, industry awareness, just looking at the competitive, marketplace. It's also being hyper specific, understanding your specific clients, either the ones you're working with now or the ones that you may prospectively work with in the future, and just being really, really clear about that. Some people just aren't. Some people are super vague about, yeah, we'll work with just about anybody, but having a really good sense of a focused, specific client type or, client profile, very important.
Okay, so we covered 5 of the 6 sales competencies so far. We've covered behaviors and attitude, sales process, sales planning, prospecting, knowledge of practice industry and the client. And now finally, the 6th sales competency that you have in your article, Mark, is pricing and value. So let's talk about some competencies within pricing and value.
One of the things I work on a lot with my clients is pricing, and not just, architects are pricing their the dollar amount is completely wrong, right? I am not a subject matter expert in any of my clients' business to the point where I am able to tell them that the specific price that they're presenting or developing is right on the mark or too high, too low, whatever else, right? What I talk about with pricing is exploring different ways to arrive at price. There's cost plus, there's market-based pricing, there's value pricing. So understanding those different areas of pricing when you are ultimately presenting pricing to your clients, being able to do so in a way that is easy for them to understand in 3-option tables, being able to uncover what's most important with your prospective clients so that then you can price those things. Because when we start pricing things that aren't important or aren't valuable to our prospective clients, we find ourselves in a tricky spot because they're just not going to pay for stuff they don't care about. And I mentioned value and value pricing, just understanding the basic tenets and concepts of what how your clients perceive and assign value to things and how you can then price those things and what value pricing is all about. Mm-hmm. And having at your sort of ready the ability in certain circumstances to be able to value price your offerings. And we don't want to get too deep into the specifics of that, but value pricing has a lot to do with being able to identify the specific outcomes that a client wants to achieve and then assigning a price to that relative to their sort of ultimate financial outcomes of the work to be done. You can do $10,000 worth of work for 2 different clients who have radically different perceptions on the ultimate financial value of the work that you're doing for them, right? So hopefully you can see that, and then you can put into practice a way to price your services differently relative to the value that they perceive. So, without getting too deep into the details of value pricing, it's an important component. And I talked about tiered pricing, 3-option pricing, et cetera. A lot of that pulls from the world of, SaaS software products and services. And there's a whole bunch of different examples that we can point to where software providers or even, professional services firms now are starting to give their clients the choice and the context that those clients need in order to make decisions, right? All too often, complex professional services are presented in a one price, take it or leave it fashion. This tiered pricing, suddenly and wonderfully lets your clients choose how they will work with you, not if they will work with you, right? So that's really important. And you can clearly see how developing skills here and then starting to use those skills when you are pricing are super important.
Yeah, and we've recorded a few different episodes on this topic. Pricing and choice architecture is one. Right. The statement of understanding is another one that kind of flows into this same topic, using cognitive biases. So there's a lot that goes into pricing and value. And so we've got other resources that if you're listening to this or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go check that out.
Good. John, I have one more bonus competency.
Oh, a bonus one. All right.
So this is something, and frankly, this could be tied to the very first category that we talked about, which is the behaviors and attitude. But in a lot of cases, I find that it is important enough to kind of call out separately. And I call it organization and getting things done. And GTD, getting things done, is a process out there. David Allen has a great book on it. I recommend anybody look at it. And there's a methodology to getting things done. All too often, even specifically when it comes to finding new work and sales, business development, that this stuff is hard, so it gets pushed to the back burner or completely off the stove altogether. So being organized and getting things done is critical to success in sales. Critical to success in a lot of things, but specifically, I would say in sales, particularly if people just aren't really excited about it. So this has to do with task management, managing your calendar properly, using time blocking for sales-related activities, using technology, maybe CRM systems for prospecting, for opportunity management, staying up to date with your pipeline opportunities, that sort of thing. So I think that last competency is really, really important because, frankly, I mentioned earlier that people just think that salespeople are just shoot from the hip, just get me in the room and I'll close the deal kind of people. But I have found the individuals who seem to excel the most at finding and winning new work are the people who are super organized and the people who are just able to get stuff done.
Yeah, that is so true. And it's easier to time block, for your prospecting research, right? And then you're in the zone for doing research. You've got that curious mindset, and then another block is completely for outreach. And then
Exactly.
you're in that mind of outreach, and I think that's really important. Yep, totally. Well, Mark, these are great sales competencies. I think we touched a little bit earlier on how firms can put these into practice by scoring each one of these different little components. And I'd assume that these would look different, depending on your firm and how you want to prioritize these different competencies, right?
Absolutely. I think there are some universals here, but I do think that any firm who wants to assess current competencies and then have a roadmap for individuals when they want to learn and improve, I think that they can edit and push and pull and consider different competencies that may be more or less important to their firm. But yeah, this is a good place to start. I would think that most firms have some type of a competency matrix relative to the performance of an engineer or an analyst or someone like that, some expert as part of their professional practice. This says if you do have people in your organization who are doers, sellers, responsible for revenue generation, you should look at those skills as well and assign some competencies to that, not just for the health of and the success of your organization, but for the success of those individuals, giving them the roadmap they need to improve, and then hopefully giving them the tools they need to walk through those 5 levels of mastery that we've talked about today.
Excellent. Well, if folks that are listening to this want to learn more, go check out Mark's article at wainwrightinsight.com. The link will be in the show notes of this podcast episode, so go check that out. Mark, I think this was a great overview of those 6 sales competencies. I think we dived pretty deep in there. And I think from this podcast episode and from your article, firms should be able to create a matrix that they can put into practice right away.
Yeah, I hope so. Thanks, John. This has been a good conversation. Until next time.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Biz Dev. Subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or listen to the show at breakingbizdev.com. This episode was produced by Red Cedar Marketing. If you think a business podcast is right for your company, visit redcedarmarketing.com to learn more.